Paris. Restaurants and romance, empire and opera, fun, surprising experiences at every one of the more than 300 stops on the metro. My name is Lisa. I'm a writer and tour guide. I carry a Canadian passport, but all we'll need is a ticket for the metro system as I show you historic, inspirational, endlessly fabulous Paris. I'd like to share my love for this spectacular city with you, one stop after the next, by way of the exciting Paris metro system. So grab your French phrasebook and put on your walking shoes. We're going to Paris. Next stop, Montparnasse, bienvenue. This time, when we hop off the metro, we'll walk out into one of this amazing city's most creative and busy neighborhoods, with a huge tower at its center and tiny historic artist studios in every corner. We'll marvel over great works of sculpture, paintings, photographs, crafts, and even the culinary arts as we get elbow to elbow with crowds at the railway station that links Paris to Brittany. Cafes, crypts, caricatures, and croissants, all in the most beautiful city in the world. Welcome to Montparnasse, bienvenue. This metro station name sounds like it is welcoming us, bienvenue to Montparnasse, but in fact it's named for the chief Paris engineer who worked on connecting this area and the Montmartre area into the central metro line. It was an amazing feat of engineering. Mr. Bienvenu was originally from Brittany, a few hours west of Paris on the coast. Over a long and illustrious career in civil engineering, Bienvenu became known as the father of the Paris Metro. One of his first major successes was the completion of the metro line from Porte de Vincennes to Porte Maillot, a 10-kilometer stretch of tunnels built in only 17 months. The city required the line to be finished in time for the 1900 World's Fair. Using innovative techniques and developing new ways to deal with the imperfect soil of the city, Mr. Bienvenu delivered the massive contract on time, much to the satisfaction of the people who described his work as worthy of the Romans. Mr. Fulgence, bienvenue, arrived here at the Gare de l'Ouest, the Montparnasse train station, where a lot of immigrants, especially from Brittany, arrived. And when you look around the neighborhood today, you will find no shortage of crêperies selling the traditional dish of Brittany, delightful crêpe breton. This area of Montparnasse became famous with artists. It's always been a wonderful place to go out, party, go to theater. A lot of people come here to see movies today, and it's a lovely place to explore. One thing that isn't so lovely in Montparnasse is probably the first thing you notice about this area. The huge, ugly, black skyscraper right on top of the metro station. The Tour Montparnasse was initially thought of in the 1930s, but it was built in 1973. There are 59 stories, and the fastest elevator in Europe will take you straight to the top in 38 seconds. The 1930s concept to remodel the area around the old train station eventually evolved into a more extensive urban renewal project by the end of the 1950s. By the time the ground was broken in 1969, this was the building chosen to be erected here. The resulting backlash against what is widely viewed as a towering eyesore was overwhelming. Just 2 years after its completion, a ban was made on any future construction of skyscrapers in the city's core. This huge office block, the busy train station, and the incessant vehicle traffic give the area a little bit of a New York vibe. But make no mistake, this is 100% Paris. This is the Place of the 18th of June, 1940, which is the date when General de Gaulle gave his first Free France speech, which is seen as the launch of the resistance to the German occupation of France. Let's take a couple of careful steps through the hurried traffic to another bustling place, where at least most of the time, things move on a schedule. This is the Gare Montparnasse. The train station is known as the Porte d'Océan because the trains from here lead to the Atlantic Ocean. Now, this train station's been here since 1969. It was renovated in 1990, but there's been a train station in Montparnasse for a lot longer than that. In fact, it was at the Gare Montparnasse in 1895 that there was a phenomenal train accident. A fully loaded train from Granville lost its brakes, jumped the barrier, slid across the platform, pierced a thick wall, went across a terrace, and through a glass window. The photograph from this accident became one of the best-known train accidents photos in history. Amazingly, although the train had been carrying 131 passengers, the only fatality was to a woman selling newspapers in the square who was struck by falling masonry. Investigation into the accident later showed that the train was running late and that the engineer had entered the station too quickly. He was fined 50 francs and the upended locomotive was removed after some difficulty. A 14-horse team failed to budget, and finally, a 250-ton winch with 10 men was used to lower the locomotive to the ground and haul it away for repair. With more than 1 million people a week coming and going from this station, many of them seeking the peace and quiet of the Atlantic coast some 3 hours away on the TGV, the Gare Montparnasse is always a busy place. But it is possible to find a little bit of peace and quiet with a taste of the Atlantic without ever having to leave town. This is the Jardin Atlantique, a relaxing haven above the bustle of the train station of Montparnasse. We're actually on the roof of the train station, and to get up to this relaxing park, you take an escalator. The park was installed in 1994. It is the largest suspended garden in the whole city, and the design is inspired by the trains going to the coast, giving the park a sailing theme. But unlike the wavy shores of Brittany, the little park on the roof of the train station seems to have gone mostly unnoticed by the crowds, making this a perfect place to take a break away from the noisy city, or maybe take a quiet moment with a significant other. This quiet spot suspended just above the constant activity of the train station is also a good place for a moment of quiet reflection on some of the most trying days in the history of the City of Light. This is the Musée Jean Moulin. It's a memorial to the liberation of Paris and to General Leclerc, who oversaw the operation of freeing the city of Paris in 1944. Inaugurated in 1994, the 50th anniversary of the liberation, the museum and memorial face the Jardin Atlantique, which opened the same year. The memorial focuses on France of the Second World War and the dark years of occupation. The Musée Jean Moulin remembers the man credited with unifying the French resistance under General de Gaulle. Moulin was ultimately captured, tortured, and killed by the Nazis, but his work in the years before his death helped to eventually drive out the occupying forces and secured his place as a hero in the history of France. Let me show you a little piece of Montparnasse history that you can eat right after this. We're in busy, bustling, beautiful Paris. Today, we're having a look at some of the many things to see and do around the Montparnasse Bienvenue metro station. The Montparnasse area takes its name from a tiny bump of a hill that was here in the 17th century, before the city grew to encompass what was once still part of the countryside. Back then, students from the Latin district liked to come here to enjoy a few drinks together on a high point. They dubbed the hill Mount Parnassus after the Greek mountain said to be home to Apollo and the Nine Muses. As the city developed over the area, the minuscule hill was leveled out, and today only the name remains. But the area is still popular with artists and students of the arts. I'd like to take you now to visit one of the gems of the Montparnasse area, a place that is creating little works of edible art every day for the enjoyment of everyone, and at a reasonable price.
Merci bien. This Moulin de la Vierge has been a bakery since 1906 in this beautiful tiled interior behind the Gare Montparnasse. But 40 years ago, it was threatened with destruction. The whole area was being renovated and this old building was supposed to be torn down. And that's when Basil Camire decided that he would personally save the bakery. He was already renting the space to use it as a music store for his music business. And he discovered that the only way to preserve the building and not have it be torn down was to rejuvenate the bakery. So he actually learned to become a baker in order to save this building. And now it's one of the most famous bakeries in this area, and the Red wins prizes every year.
The offerings at the Moulin de la Vierge bakery are not fancy quadruple-decker cakes with gold leaf and ivy decorations. Instead, here you'll find simple, classic French breads and pastries made with natural ingredients in the same way they have been for centuries. In fact, when Mr. Camire decided to turn his music store back into a bakery, he was lucky enough to find the old wood-fired oven still in the basement. This wonderful old baker's kitchen was being used as a storeroom, and it didn't take much to get the old oven back into the business of producing delicious fresh bread. You won't find huge automated bread-making machines here. Just a pair of strong and skilled hands doing what they've done over and over again, creating delicious traditional French bread and pastries. Many foodies will tell you that the best bread in the world is baked in Paris, where French law requires that baguettes be made without preservatives. This means that bread goes stale in less than 24 hours, making daily trips for a fresh loaf part of life in Paris. As well as the oven, the bakery's original interior with its hand-painted tin ceiling tiles has survived and remains to be admired as clients drop in for their daily baguette. If you're feeling like a little walk after your chocolate croissant, or if you're struck with a sudden need to confess, I have a spot about 5 blocks from the bakery that will be just the ticket. This is Notre-Dame du Travail, which was built in 1901 for the workers of this area. Now, the construction crews from here worked on building exhibition halls and scaffoldings over by the Champ de Mars, Eiffel Tower area for the big exhibitions of the day. And to validate their work and make them feel more comfortable inside the church, the interior is designed like an exhibition hall. The scaffolding is exposed. It's really unusual for a church, and you have to go inside and check it out. Many of the people who came to Paris at the end of the 19th century came seeking construction work as they stepped off the trains in Montparnasse and settled into their new homes. The city was gearing up for the World's Fair, and steel construction was the order of the day. Along with gorgeous steel bridges and monuments like the Eiffel Tower, giant exhibition halls were being built for the fair. The same workers who erected these magnificent structures then came home to Montparnasse at the end of their workday. They came to worship in a church that reflected the ingenuity of their craft. Rather than covering the steel frame with ornate stone and woodwork, Notre-Dame de Travail leaves the building's skeleton on display to honor the memory of the workers who built an amazing city. Of course, Paris is renowned for more than its craftsmen. Many wonderful artists have made the City of Light their home as well, and Montparnasse was for many years a hotspot for the artists of Paris.
In 1915, a woman named Marie Vassilieff opened a canteen here that became really popular with artists in the neighborhood. People like Picasso, Chagall, Modigliani all had their studios in this part of Montparnasse, and they would come here for an inexpensive drink and to hang out with friends.
Today, the charming passageway at number 21 Avenue du Maine is one of the few still accessible to the public. It continues to be a place that remembers the artistic roots of Montparnasse.
After being a gallery for a number of decades, it's now the Musée de Montparnasse, where you can see all kinds of rotating art shows.
The museum has no permanent collection, but there's always something wonderful on display here for art lovers. As evidence that the creative community continues to thrive here, there's a membership program for those interested in returning monthly for evening meetings and a variety of cultural goings-on. Perhaps as fascinating as the art in the musée is the beautifully preserved alleyway itself. In a part of town that has developed and modernized so much, this bit of the past is well worth a quiet moment to visit and appreciate. Paris is a city rich in museums, and many of these are right here in the Montparnasse area. I've got a couple more nearby I'd like to show you right after this. We're in creative, colorful, inspirational Paris, and we're taking in some of the many things to see and do in the busy area around the Montparnasse metro station. This area of town is constantly abuzz with people as they come and go from the busy train station that connects the city to points west. But people are not the only ones to ride the trains. Since 1576, La Poste, as the French postal service is called, carries the mail domestically and abroad.
This is the Musée de la Poste, which has 5 whole floors devoted to the French postal system. But what's wonderful about this is they also have great temporary exhibits. So when you're in Paris, check out what's on right now.
French history is replete with famous letters. Love letters like the ones written by Gustave Flaubert, Honoré de Balzac, Victor Hugo, and even Napoleon the Conqueror himself have entered the history of correspondence. And of course, not all letters were dripping with love, as with the now famous J'accuse letter, written in 1898 by Émile Zola to then French President Félix Faure, accusing his government of wrongdoing and anti-Semitism. In fact, as you'll learn at the Musée de la Poste, since the dawn of the written word, there has been a need to preserve and transport writings to another location. You'll see early clay tablets and papyruses, systems much older than the 400-year-old French postal service. Of course, communication today has become more complex than scribbles on paper carried by horseback, trains, and planes. But even before email and the cell phone, there was the semaphore system. Invented by Frenchman Claude Chappe at the end of the 1700s. This system of mechanical flags creates a series of coded shapes which are visually relayed from tower to send a message. The desire to move messages over a great distance helped advance civilization, leading to innovations like the telegraph and semaphore. But the post even helped create the identity of France, like with these early maps at the Musée de la Poste, carefully made so that the mail carriers could find their way across a still evolving France and further east around the Mediterranean. So if you have an interest in communication and history, or if you just like to learn about one of the oldest operating postal services on Earth, the Musée de la Poste in Montparnasse is a great place to spend some time. Speaking of museums, there are more than a few in Montparnasse, hardly a surprise given the area's long history of being popular with artists. I'd like to show you an amazing collection of sculpture all by one artist, assembled in one place, and what a place.
This is the Musée Bourdelle. He was a student of Rodin, and the museum's been open since 1949. There's a wonderful selection of his work, including a beautiful sculpture garden, and the extension was built by Christian de Portzamparc, who is a famous contemporary French architect.
It was in 1885 that Antoine Bourdelle moved into his studio here in Montparnasse. And for more than 40 years, he created amazing sculpture right here. It was his wish that after his death, the space be kept and used to display his work. His wishes were respected by his family, and the museum grew around the great sculptor's perfectly preserved studio. The adjoining museum was completely renovated in 1992 and is the perfect environment for the work of such an influential and prolific artist. The sculptures of Bourdelle are perhaps less well known than those of his friend and teacher Auguste Rodin, creator of The Thinker. But Bourdelle himself would be a teacher to many other artists, and ultimately he had a vast influence of his own. His work broke away from stale conventions of classical sculpture and used simplification and bold geometry combined with roughened, rippling surfaces to create expressive and powerful pieces. During his career, Bourdelle was commissioned to create many monuments and memorials, examples of which can be found all over the world, including South America, the United States, Europe, Australia, and Asia. Experiencing so many fabulous works of sculpture in such a serene and beautiful place as Bourdelle's home and studio here at the Musée Bourdelle in Montparnasse is an encounter art lovers will remember for a lifetime. Bringing home an original Bourdelle bronze might shatter your Paris vacation budget, but there's plenty of more affordable art still being created in Montparnasse. Let me show you a little open-air artists market that may have something you'll like.
This is the Boulevard Edgar Quinet in the shadow of the Montparnasse Tower. On Wednesdays and Saturdays, there's a food market, but on Sundays, all day long, there's a wonderful craft and art market, and there's often even a jazz band in the corner of the square.
One of the nice parts about visiting the arts and crafts market here on a Sunday is that the work in the 150 or so stalls is all being presented and sold by the artists themselves. You may want to keep this in mind if you see something you don't like, as offhand comments may offend sensitive ears. But the presence of the artists will give you a chance to chat and pick up some background information on a piece. There are more than just paintings and sketches to be seen here as well. Some of the artists create ceramic items or small sculptures, as well as the beautiful watercolors and oils. Whether you plan to pick up a souvenir or just stroll through the market to admire the arts and crafts, if you find yourself in Montparnasse on a Sunday, this market on Edgar Quinet is well worth a look. Montparnasse artists are not restricted to the fine arts. There are plenty of Parisians practicing the culinary arts here as well, as I'll show you right after this. We're in Paris exploring the Montparnasse neighborhood with all its busy, creative, and amazing aspects. The next place I want to show you may not strike you as the cheeriest to visit, but once you get past the creepiness factor, you'll be surprised at what an interesting spot the cemetery can be.
Behind me is an entrance to the Cimetière de Montparnasse. This is the second largest cemetery in Paris, and it opened in 1824. Now, one of the interesting things about the cemetery is once it opened in Montparnasse, of course, it attracted tombstone carvers. And with tombstone carvers, there were also stone merchants. And that meant there was a good supply of granite and so forth here, which attracted sculptors, because artists found it hard to get good quality stone to carve in Paris. So this contributed, strangely enough, to the atmosphere of the arts in Montparnasse, and actually several famous local sculptors, including Zadkine and Brancusi, have carved tombstones here.
Originally, this necropolis was known as the Cimetière du Sud, or the Cemetery of the South, and it's one of three principal Paris cemeteries today. The other two are Père Lachaise and Montmartre. The cemetery is on relatively flat land and laid out in a rough grid, making it easy to find your way around. To help you find specific graves, there are usually guide maps available at the 4 entrances to the cemetery. Some of the more notable grave sites here include Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, Charles Baudelaire, Susan Sontag, and architect Charles Garnier. Far from being a frightening experience, a stroll around the Montparnasse Cemetery can be an interesting and relaxing way to get away from the constant movement and noise of the busy Paris streets. But if a visit to the dearly departed of Paris has left you feeling a little somber, what better than some shopping to get you back into the swing of things?
This is the Rue Raymond Losserand, which is a great local shopping strip here just to the south of Boulevard Montparnasse, which is big and bustling, whereas over here you get much more of a neighborhood feeling, tucked a little bit to the south of the Montparnasse Cemetery.
And if you feel like staying in Paris a little longer, there's rental property on the upper floors, although a tiny one-room flat here will set you back well over €1,000 a month. Montparnasse is almost always busy, from the travelers at the train station to shoppers on the boulevards to students rushing off to class. All of this activity has made me work up an appetite. Luckily, I've lined up a visit to a restaurant that serves up a tasty treat that emigrated to Paris from Brittany and has since made a place for itself all over the world, the traditional crêpe breton.
I just ordered a fabulous sounding complète. They have a whole range of complètes, which means you've got a whole bunch of basic ingredients in your buckwheat crepe. So I ordered egg, ham, normal cheese, and chèvre goat cheese.
The Breton-style crêpe usually comes in one of 2 forms, the sweet crêpe made with wheat flour and the savory or buckwheat crêpe, like the one the chef is making for me. The crêpes are made paper thin and cooked in next to no time, so they make a perfect quick meal.
Merci. Génial. Oh, it looks great. So I'm gonna have some cider because they have cider on tap at the Crêperie de Quimper, which is kind of fabulous. So, and it's really dry cider. It's wonderful. Now, no Breton crepe is correct without a lot of butter. This looks great. Oh, it's a wonderful one. Really cheesy. That's good. There are a slew of crêperies from Brittany here on Rue de Montparnasse, just above the Gaîté Theatre District. And there's a reason for these crêperies. It's because people from Brittany in the early 20th century immigrated to Paris because there were no jobs in Brittany. So they moved here, they got off at the Gare Montparnasse, and they settled in the area. It wasn't far to go, it was a good working class neighborhood, and there were construction jobs here. So this area developed with crêperies and cider bars to cater to this new population that was developing here right on the side of the railway station.
And not the least among them, the Crêperie Quimper, where I've stopped for lunch, named for the capital of Brittany. I wasn't planning on having more than the buckwheat crepe, but the delicate, thin, sweet crepes coming off the cooktop look so simply irresistible. I'll just forego the ice cream on top of mine.
Merci. Wow, that's great. Salted caramel and butter on a crepe. Salted caramel is from the coast. This is its traditional place. And butter is crucial for anything from Brittany because Brittany is famous for its salted butter.
I know, you're probably thinking, really? 2 crêpes? But come on, they're paper thin. And besides, the next spot that I want to show you requires a little bit of walking.
This is Place du Catalogne, which is surrounded by buildings by contemporary architect Richard Beaufil, who's famous as a neoclassic architect.
Beaufil, who was born in Spain and studied in Switzerland, has designed impressive buildings all over the world. In the early 1980s, he was commissioned to redevelop a large space behind Montparnasse train station. Although based in Spain, Beaufil's architectural workshop, as it is called, employs not only architects and designers, but also musicians, filmmakers, and philosophers. In creating the 3 impressive curving buildings that wrap around the central tilted water feature, Beaufil broke from the traditional straight lines found throughout Paris architecture and instead favored the classic curving lines of the ancient Romans. Despite breaking from some Parisian building norms, the 274 apartment complex squeaks under the city's strict limit of 7 floors. Yet it sits in the shadow of the looming 59-story Montparnasse Tower, built a decade earlier. Other Beaufil designs worldwide include the Barcelona Airport, the Shepherd School of Music in Houston, and the United Airlines headquarters in Chicago. Of his creations here in Montparnasse, Beaufil is quoted as saying he wanted to create monuments for the people.
From this place, you get wonderful views of the Eiffel Tower because you're up on Montparnasse, this slight hill in the Paris area.
The Montparnasse area has a rich history of artists, both French-born and those who came to Paris and made it their home. Great artists like Ossip Zadkine not only created here, they also taught new artists. We'll visit Zadkine's atelier right after this. We're in striking, colorful, inspired Paris. Let me take you about 10 minutes walk east of the metro, to the former home and studio of one of Montparnasse's masters.
This is the Musée Zadkine, the former atelier of Russian-born artist Osip Zadkine, who worked in this atelier on his sculptures from 1928 until 1967. Now, when Zadkine moved in here just off the Boulevard Montparnasse, the area was becoming filled with artists like himself looking for cheap rent and good studio space with northern-facing windows so the artists could sculpt and paint with the right kind of non-glary light. Now, this atelier became a museum after Zadkine's death in 1967. He was really well respected as a teacher to a lot of artists who came to Montparnasse specifically to study with this Cubist artist.
It was the generosity of Zadkine's wife, Valentine Prax, who willed that the home she shared with the artist, along with Zadkine's personal collection, be donated to the city of Paris. You can visit the museum, which is open daily except Mondays, and admire the priceless collection at no charge. The museum's collection contains over 300 works, which span the artist's entire career. When he arrived in Paris, the artist became part of the then new and radical Cubist movement, characterized by its combination of multiple viewpoints into a single piece. Later works in the collection show how Zadkine developed his own distinct style, heavily influenced by African art. Zadkine's work is on display in Amsterdam, Jerusalem, and elsewhere, but perhaps his most famous piece is the bronze masterpiece To a Destroyed City, an homage to Rotterdam after its destruction in World War II. Any art lover would be impressed by the large collection of Zadkine's work and the charming old studio that houses it. And with free admission, it's hard to find a better deal anywhere in Montparnasse. Between 1945 and his death over 20 years later, Zadkine would make the 5-minute walk west to Rue de la Grande Chaumière, where he taught sculpture to eager young students.
This is the Académie de la Grande Chaumière, where local artists like Zadkine and Bourdelle taught. It's also where Giacometti studied. And actually, in the original Académie de la Grande Chaumière, the painting school was just a little higher up the block, and it's where artists like Gauguin, Whistler, and Manet studied painting.
The Academy was founded by Swiss artist Martha Stettler. In 1904, at the time of its founding, the school was considered to be somewhat a maverick, as Martha refused to teach the strict rules of the École des Beaux-Arts, opening the way for the Art Indépendant movement.
Today, if you visit, you can actually still buy art supplies a little further down this block, and it's the shop where people like Picasso used to stock up for their painting around in Montparnasse.
What better souvenir of this creative neighborhood than a set of colors purchased at the same store where the greats came to shop? Many fantastic images have been captured in Paris, but not all are achieved by the use of a painter's brush or a sculptor's chisel. Many others use the camera's lens to immortalize a moment.
Henri Cartier-Bresson was one of the great photojournalists. He co-founded the French photo agency Magnum, which still exists today. And if you visit the Foundation's home behind me in this atelier from 1912, you can see amazing photographs and new upcoming eyes in photojournalism.
The Foundation Henri Cartier-Bresson is housed in this historic Montparnasse artist studio called La Maison des Artistes, which means the artist's house. The amazingly modern-looking loft was built in 1912, and the building won a prize for architecture. The soft, diffuse light inside is perfect for exhibitions. The inexpensive buildings in the area were well suited to artists' needs and played an important role in attracting many creative people to Montparnasse. The gallery today houses the work of acclaimed photojournalists, both Cartier-Bresson and new contemporaries, and charges just a few euros for admission. But don't come in August when the Atelier closes for summer holidays. We've talked lots about historic artists who lived and worked in Montparnasse, but some are still here. We'll go for a coffee with one of the best right after this. We're in friendly, innovative, captivating Paris. We've been doing quite a bit of walking as we discover the busy, artistic neighborhood around the Montparnasse Bienvenue metro station. Luckily, there are more than a few cafes where we can catch our breath in this bustling part of town.
The cafes of Montparnasse really hit their stride in the early 1920s with all the artists in the neighborhood. In fact, behind me, the Café Rotonde was Picasso's favorite place to have a coffee on the boulevard. But in the 1920s, the popularity of the Rotonde hit a slight bump when the management would not let an American woman smoke her cigarette on their terrace. You see, 1920s ladies shouldn't have smoked in public. It was frowned upon. So the American woman said fine, took her cigarette and crossed the boulevard over to the less popular shady side of the street where there was Le Dôme, and she sat down on their terrace, ordered a glass of cheap white wine, and smoked her cigarette in peace. So the Dôme also became a popular cafe because of that event. It was solidarity to the smoking American.
Just steps from the Rotonde and the Dôme cafes on Boulevard Montparnasse is the marvelous historic cafe called Le Select.
The Select opened in 1925, and it was the first 24-hour cafe on this strip of the boulevard, which made it immediately popular with the late-night artist crowd. And this evening, I'm going to meet my artist friend Rick Toka for a drink at the Select.
The Select is almost always open any time of day or night, which means that this cafe never has any shortage of interesting characters at the tables sipping wine or coffee in this iconic Paris cafe. In fact, these characters are exactly why Rick likes to hang out here.
Hey, Rick.
Hi.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
What's going on?
Rick is originally a New Yorker, but he's called Paris his home for about 20 years now. He's an extremely talented caricature artist and a regular contributor to Mad magazine, as well as numerous other American and European publications. Rick likes sketching here at Le Select, partly because of the layout.
A lot of cafes are set up where the tables face the street. So when you're sitting along the wall here in the back, you get people facing each other, and it's a large enough terrace that, you know, I can draw somebody way down there and that they don't know I'm doing it. So, you know, because I'm always drawing in secret. Nobody knows I'm doing this.
The result of Rick's clandestine sketching is a series of delightful caricatures and humorous illustrations that capture all the feeling and expression of the cafe and its myriad of clients. The Select and Rick's drawings unite people from all walks of Parisian life.
I just try and do one good drawing while I'm here. Sometimes they're so perfect I don't even have to draw them because they're already a caricature. I mean, they just walk in and it's just like, I don't even have to do anything. And sometimes the people have left and I'll just sit here and finish the drawing up. I don't have to, you know. And sometimes there's nobody here to draw at all. There's not one person who's interesting.
Have you drawn the waiters here?
Yeah, they're in my book about the cafe.
Actually, I knew you had drawn the waiters at the cafe because I have a copy of your book, and I would love it if you would sign it for me.
Oh, sure.
So actually, Rick collaborated with an author I really love, Noel Riley Fitch, who is an expert on this era, this period of time of the great literary cafes and the artists of Paris and the expats, and they collaborated on a history of the Select, which is these wonderful drawings from here that Rick does, and history of the actual cafe. So please sign it to me. Thank you so much.
What a treat to end a beautiful day in gorgeous, creative Montparnasse. As I enjoy another coffee at the Café Le Select with Rick, I'll thank him for his autograph, and thank you for joining me today as we explored the neighborhood around the metro stop of Montparnasse Bienvenue. Come back next time and we'll see what we can discover at Paris' next stop.